Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and today I'm going to talk about the film San Andreas. The disaster movie genre is known for being dumb, fairly dumb mass market, public consumption kind of entertainment, and San Andreas certainly understood the dumb part of it. It is as dumb as you could expect from a disaster movie, and one that doesn't even respect the disaster movies that have worked before it and why it worked before it. It seems to only just want to repeat those beats without actually trying to find a way to build those characters. Even though you could say the disaster movie characters aren't very well built and no one really cares about their character development, and that's kind of the attitude of San Andreas anyway, which makes its characters' motivations sometimes confusing and odd and doesn't really make a lot of sense overall, but tries to have all those cool special effects disaster sequences to hopefully kind of patch it all together, and you get a kind of just a stupid disaster movie that doesn't exactly work other than doing the stupid disaster stuff that it was really made to do. A fire and rescue helicopter pilot played by Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. He used to be in Afghanistan, but then he came back. He had 600 confirmed rescues, and he's working for the state of California, rescuing people in his helicopter. And there's a cool sequence at the beginning where he saves a girl who fell down a cliff in her car, and he is recently getting divorced. In fact, he gets the divorce papers, which have big red letters on them that says divorce papers attached, because this movie's not subtle. And then he's supposed to take his daughter to college over the weekend. He took some days off, but then a massive earthquake hits the Hoover Dam, and Paul Giamatti's trying to tell people about it. That plot line's up. Paul Giamatti's in this movie also. He's warning people and stuff. And so the Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson's supposed to do that, but then he goes off in his helicopter. Then he sees that there's an earthquake, so he tries to save his recently almost divorced wife, and then he goes to San Francisco to save their daughter, who is there with his wife's new boyfriend who's rich, and they have to survive all these earthquakes that are happening throughout California without really helping anyone else, even though, you know, it's a massive disaster and he probably should because he's in fire and rescue. But he ignores that and goes off on a mission to save his daughter and get her to safety. There is a way to do a big disaster movie, and that's to really have all the character types really spelled out. They have to be spelled out, so you don't have to really think about it. These movies usually have way too many characters. They almost have to do that or it just really wouldn't work. This movie tries to do it at the beginning, but then doesn't really care about what they're setting up. They have a whole team of people with The Rock at the beginning of the film who then they just kind of forget about completely, and they set them up and he goes on a mission with them, and then you know he's going to get in the helicopter with them, but then suddenly he's in the helicopter by himself, which seems odd, and then he just goes off and saves his daughter. No one even tries to contact him like, what are you doing? Why aren't you helping all these people? A massive disastrous earthquake has happened and you've gone off and gone AWOL. And in the earlier part of the movie, his character keeps saying it's just part of the job, acts like, you know, he really cares about the job. He's a very professional man, and then as soon as this happened, he's like, oh, I'm out of here. And of course, people would say, like, you know, anything for family and things like that, but it doesn't really set that up at all. The boyfriend, played by Jan Gottfried, who was Mr. Fantastic in the older Fantastic Four movies, I guess now, he suddenly becomes like a really shitty person on like a dime. Not really set up at all. It would have been nice if they kind of set that up, but they don't. And even the thing with his daughter, who's by herself with these English guy and his younger brother, who she just kind of meets in the waiting room of her mom's boyfriend's building. She helps them out and helps them survive based on knowledge they've learned from her dad because he worked fire and rescue. One of the big disaster movies was a plane movie. It was one of the movies that really influenced Airplane. It was called The High and the Mighty, and they actually have each of the passengers come up to the ticket counter and almost kind of explain who they are. It's a little too obvious. It's a very on the nose, but it works for that kind of a movie. These movies aren't subtle. It's kind of silly to point out that they're not subtle, even though I did that just now before. If you're that upfront about it, you don't have to think about those things. And with this, I expected him to be helping more people, but they don't help anybody except for people he's related to or married to, and maybe those two English guys, but like that's about it. Since this is a massive crisis on an epic scale, he'd kind of give a shit. His daughter doesn't give a shit either. There's a scene where they go inside a fire truck to get like safety supplies. All these other people are walking right by, and some are like in really bad shape, and there's times they walk by wounded and just like kind of don't care. And I understand, like, you know, survival of the fittest, and when you're in that kind of situation you do those things, heroes, but the flagrant disregard for anyone else. In Independence Day, they help people out who they find. There seems to be more of a camaraderie. In this film, it seems to be just this family, one and all. It's weird that this film cares so much about this family, but they don't care about clearly setting up any of these archetypes that go throughout the film. They feel like a lot of this stuff just comes out of nowhere when the disaster thing happens. It's almost like a horror movie where, hey, we set up these characters, you're into them, okay, the horror movie starts, just forget about all that acting and character development. This movie's doing more of a 180, just completely changing these people to fit the situation that they want. Then I'm like, why did you make that first part anyway? Like, the first part, it almost feels like if you caught this movie on TV and just caught it on when the earthquake starts, you wouldn't be missing anything. And it's not very playful with its action sequences. It's not very well shot. It's done by this guy Brad Peyton, who's done Journey to the Center of the Earth 2 with The Rock and Cats and Dogs 2. He shoots it like kind of just a regular studio director. I wouldn't say a hack, just like one who kind of cares about what they're doing but doesn't really have a real finesse or art to what he's doing or skill. Sometimes it felt like the cuts were just very random. They weren't there to set up geography or anything, kind of like how this script is. That's kind of all of San Andreas. They kind of just do things they're supposed to be doing and they hope it works out. It does have its funny, cheesy moments. One joke is so bad it was painful, but it made me laugh when The Rock and his ex-wife, soon-to-be ex-wife, parachute into a baseball field and they parachute onto second base, and then he goes, "I never thought I'd get you to second base again." And I was like, oh my god, that's the worst joke. Unfortunately, The Rock's not very funny in this movie, and that was about as funny as he gets. It doesn't really take advantage of The Rock's charisma. That's kind of the problem with him being cast in a lot of these movies, is like they don't really know what to do with him. The Fast and Furious films, I think, get what to do with The Rock. The serious stuff he's not really that great at. He needs to get an agent who knows how to cast him, not just cast him in a bunch of big stuff. I actually think The Rock's a really good movie star. He ends up being in a lot of stuff that don't reflect how good of a movie star he is. It's a little weird to have this film be an ensemble, but he's the star and it's a disaster movie. Independence Day, Will Smith's not the star, or Bill Pullman's not the star, or Jeff Goldblum's not the star. You can't have a star in a disaster movie unless you're only following them. But since you're cutting between like 3 different plot lines, having him be the name kind of doesn't work. Paul Giamatti's just doing the Paul Giamatti thing. His plot line is a little silly. That one really had no connection to anything, and it's just like, oh, this is an epic scale level thing. I don't know why that needed to be explained. It probably would have been cooler if it just kind of randomly kept happening. Alexandra Daddario, who I've only seen in like True Detective, she's very pretty and stuff. And I liked her character because she knew so much of what to do in this situation. She was kind of like guiding these 2 guys around. That probably would have been a cool movie. Just her keep coming up with all these ideas, and she had the star charisma to pull it off. She's probably the only person who like really kind of gave a shit about this movie, probably because it's a bigger opportunity for her, whereas The Rock's gonna have another big movie. Paul Giamatti's just in everything. Everyone else, it's not a big deal for them, but to her, it's like her first big epic blockbuster, except for I think she was in those Percy Jackson movies. She seems to make the most of it, and it's like the only one who really tries to do a star charisma type of thing. The flagrant disregard for anyone else around them is pretty shocking. How stupid it really is, just how unfun it is. Disaster movies are fun, escapist movies. It kind of succeeds on that. There's certain moments like when, spoiler I guess, but Jan Gottfried gets squished. That made me laugh. There's like a few things, but not enough really. It also made me think about disaster movies in general. Disaster movies haven't really been able to evolve with the summer movie landscape, and watching this movie, it doesn't really make a good case for it to evolve with it. It doesn't really get like the more character-based scripts we're used to from somebody like Marvel, or the crazy action that we just saw with Mad Max Fury Road. Hey, aren't you wowed by this amazing digital falling city? Yeah, I saw that in like 2012, and in Aftershock, and in Independence Day, and in The Day After Tomorrow. And then they bring up You'll Feel It on the East Coast. That never comes back. That's just for effect. Paul Giamatti just likes hyping shit up. This movie's really just hoping that the awe-inspiring thing that something like Independence Day was back in its day, you actually kind of have to resonate with an audience. You can't just surprise them with digital falling buildings and shit. It doesn't really work as well as it used to. Reminds me of of why I didn't really like most of those disaster movies in the first place, and it kind of reminds me why the ones I liked are actually good, because they understand how you have to have distinct personalities, how you have to set up those distinct personalities, so when you get to that, you feel like you're with someone. This felt like very like it washed over me the whole time. It connects as kind of like a dumb summer movie on a very basic, boring level, and it reminded me of what I don't like about summer movies and why it actually kind of sucks sometimes to be into movies in the summer, because you get crap like this. The amount of trying that they put into this and ways to get this to work and care they put into it is so nil, it kind of matches the apathy I have for both movies like this in general and San Andreas itself. So if you have seen San Andreas and you would like to talk about it, then comment below in the comments and subscribe if you would like to.